Hello everyone! I know it's been a while since I did a traditional video, but this time Ohuhu is releasing their acrylic markers and wanted me to try them out. They were even nice enough to host a giveaway with not one, but 3 winners for this video, so stay tuned because I will be talking about that later on. So this set has 30 colors. The markers are double-sided with a brush side and a pen side for the smaller details. In this video, I ended up using both interchangeably. It also comes with some extra brush tips. And of course, a black and white swatch sheet. What it doesn't come with is a protector for the markers bleeding through the paper, but that's not a huge deal with acrylic. The real test is if the paper curls up. They sent me 2 marker pads, but I'll only be using the smaller spiral bound one today. The other one is bigger and easier to rip out for when you want to work on single pages, so I won't be using that today. The spiral bound one is the same size as their usual spiral bound pads. Here's the one they gave me for alcohol markers in comparison. So you are supposed to shake these things up and then press it down onto your page to let the paint out. And I don't know what happened with this yellow one that I tried, but it kind of spilled out in my first press. The other ones were fine though. I think I just messed up along the way. With the brush side, you kind of have to press down longer and a lot more times to get the paint to come through. And I will say, it is pretty satisfying to see it seep through the brush tip for the first time, to just see the paint start to drip down and fill the brush tip. Right off the bat, the colors were so vibrant. When I saw the swatches, I knew I had to draw my most colorful OC, Sydney. She's a very kidcore character if you don't already know her. There's lots of blue, yellow, and red in her color scheme, basically primary colors. Honestly, I got pretty excited and inspired just looking at how vibrant the colors were. So the sketching part of this is gonna be pretty brief because obviously the markers are the focus of this video. As you can see though, I already used the alcohol markers at this point because I tried to record, but the quality wasn't up to my standards, so I decided to do another page. This time I prepped what I wanted to do digitally first, so I'm gonna do this, which I mapped out in colors and everything. My idea with this page was kind of like a character sheet or a magazine cover like the ones you see on Pinterest, which I've always wanted to do with Sydney. And after working on that first page, the red marker specifically stood out to me. I really enjoyed working with it, and there's something really satisfying about laying down that color. So I wanted to do something where that red was the star or the focus of the artwork. So I'm making her wear a red dress, which is going to be the focal point of the entire piece. Hopefully, at least. That's what I'm going for. So I sketched this with a simple 2B graphite pencil. Don't remember where I got it from, unfortunately. And then after I was satisfied with my sketch, I went over it with an orange Prismacolor pencil. And I do this because I don't want the graphite to be smudging everywhere. I've noticed that the graphite tends to smudge, especially when I go over it with something wet like alcohol markers. So I wanted to avoid that since I'm going to be using alcohol markers for the skin. Everything else will be with the acrylic. And I think for the most part, this sketch turned out okay. It's a good enough skeleton for what I wanted to do, and I just had to remind myself that sketches aren't supposed to be perfect. It's okay if there's some stuff that, can be fixed, because I could just fix that with the acrylic markers. So before I head into coloring this piece, it is time to announce the giveaway. Ohuhu is giving away 3 of their Honolulu alcohol marker sets, and it has a good range of colors, as you can see in the swatches. So the rules to join are: on Instagram, make sure you're following me and Ohuhu, then like my giveaway post and tag a couple friends in the comments. And also, I do believe Ohuhu ships to other countries as well, so feel free to join even if you don't live in the United States. Good luck to everyone. And now on to coloring and showing off these markers. So even though this is the first time I'm working with acrylic markers, this isn't the first time I'm working with acrylic in general, because I have painted with acrylic before. I know the basics of how paint works. And trying these markers out, I was kind of just going off of that knowledge that I have from painting with acrylic. Like, I know that it's usually darker when it's wet, and it can also get reactivated when it's wet. So since I knew that I was going to do the skin first with wet alcohol markers, I knew that I had to be very careful with that, and I had to do that as my first layer. Because if I put alcohol on top of the acrylic paint, it definitely would have messed it up, especially since alcohol is more intense than just water. You know, like alcohol markers can even like melt color pencils a little bit if you put it on top of them. So I had to really think about this in terms of layers and being able to paint over things and all that. And I was really excited to do that because in digital art, I overpaint a lot. And that's something that I can't do with traditional alcohol markers, but with acrylic markers, I can do that. And by the way, this acrylic set is on sale right now, so if you're thinking of grabbing it, do it now so you can save some of your money. So unfortunately, this set didn't have a color that matched my character's skin tone, so I went ahead and looked through my Ohuhu alcohol markers for the skin tone. My approach with the skin was to keep it as simple as possible, which is kind of like really hard for me. My hands just want to add detail after detail in any type of art that I do, really, so it was pretty difficult to keep this skin simple. I had to restrain myself a lot, and I initially just wanted it to be one layer and that's it, no more touching it, but no, I just had to go back in and try to add a little bit of shading in certain areas because I just couldn't help myself. So the first page where I use these markers, which you saw before I started sketching this page, I was just going with the flow, and it was a pretty chaotic process. But this time around, I really wanted to plan it out and put more thought into where things were going, what colors I was going to use, where I was going to use them. And I was also thinking about how I was going to layer these colors and layer these sections of the artwork. Because acrylic painting is all about layering things properly. And even though I tried to keep that in mind, there were definitely some sections of this where I could have done it better. So, for example, after I do the skin, I outline it with the black paint marker. But I should have done the black after I finished doing the dress, so that the black would be on top, and it would have prevented me from smudging the black into the red. But because I didn't do that, some of my red got onto the black and covered it up. And because I didn't wait until the black was completely dry, and it actually dried slower because it was on top of wet alcohol layer, I got some of the black paint onto my red brush tip. Luckily, I was able to rub it off and clean it off with a scrap paper, but I could have just avoided that if I remembered to layer properly and save the black for last. So if you're like me and sometimes you get impatient and you don't want to wait until a layer is wet, or you kind of get ahead of yourself a little bit and you think it's dry, but then it's not, and it smudges onto your brush, it's very handy to have a piece of scrap paper that you can use to kind of like reset the brush tip a little bit. Like if you get some red on your yellow marker, you can just like scribble a little bit on your scrap paper and get that red off before going back to your artwork. So one thing that I think these markers do very well is that they are very opaque. Most of these colors, I did not have to do a second layer to get the level of opaqueness that I wanted, even on top of black. And if you look at the blue highlight in her hair, I only did one layer with that, and it didn't need a second one to show very opaque onto the black. But I will say though, one marker that did kind of struggle with this was yellow. For some reason, yellow paints tend to struggle with this like opaque problem. When I was putting the stars onto her red dress, it was not being that opaque, and I kind of had to go with a second layer on some of the stars. But I'm not sure if this is just a problem with yellow pigments in general, or if it's actually a problem with Ohuhu's formula. I feel like I would have this problem even when using other acrylic paints, so maybe it is just like a yellow thing. The paint also doesn't really mess up the paper even when you do multiple layers with it. Now this might be dependent on the paper that you're using, but the paper in this spiral bound pad didn't get messed up. It didn't start to get muddy and rip, like in the way that that thing that happens when paper is kind of wet and you keep rubbing on top of it with whatever brush you're working with. So it's like when the brush kind of rips into the wet paper a little bit and makes it muddy. And this didn't happen with this paper, but it did curl up in the corners. However, I think this is something that can be prevented if you tape it down before going in there with the acrylic markers. Like you can tape it down with the other pages and maybe that'll prevent it from curling up, but I don't even know if this is something that's like completely preventable unless you rip it out and you tape it onto the table you're working on. But I didn't want to do that. And halfway through I actually tried to tape it into like the other pages, but my tape was too small and it wasn't holding the paper down. And I was too lazy to get bigger tape, so I just let it curl up. So another very satisfying thing about these markers is that they are so vibrant. It scratches my brain to shade with them or to fill things in with them. Like when I filled in the dress, it was so satisfying and fun to do. It just makes me want to do another page with just like things where I fill them in with solid colors. And I know that I gush a lot about this red in this video. You'll see later on, but it's just so good. Like it's like doing things to me. It's changing my brain chemistry with how good and vibrant that it looks. The shade of green that I used in this video is also really nice. It's like a turquoise type of green, and it just like really matches the red well. And I appreciate that Ohuhu included shades that work well together. And these markers are also just like generally really easy to work with, especially as a person who was like, you know, using acrylic markers for the first time. While using these, sometimes I honestly forgot that I was working with paint because they just feel so much like, you know, regular markers. Like I would forget and then I would like get some paint on my fingers and then I would remember like, oh wait, I'm working with paint. I probably shouldn't touch it before it's dry. And I guess it's just kind of like weird to work with paint in such an easy access and clean type of way, because usually I associate paint as a time to sit down and get messy, because it's something that requires a lot of setup. I have to go and get my water and then a towel to clean my brushes after every color, and then I have to get a palette and mix paint. And there's just like so much involved in it. But then this is like you just shake the marker a little bit and then boom, you have acrylic paint. And it's just like, it's a really great way to work, especially if you're really into acrylic paint and you're able to do it like in a sketchbook instead of always having to pull out a canvas. So it's really cool. Now, this wouldn't be an honest review if I didn't talk about some of the things I had problems with. So here are the cons. It was a little weird to work with the brush tip. So while the marker itself felt really good to use, I did kind of struggle with the bulky tip. The pen side was fine. It was like, okay, I'm using this to work on details and stuff. But with the brush tip, I think I'm so used to working with a felt tip that this one felt like really big and bulky and kind of difficult to control. I feel like because it's round, it's harder to be exact with what you're doing, and it's harder to tell exactly where the paint is landing. So I think it would be really nice in the future to have a felt tip that you can use for these markers, because a felt tip, you're able to, with low pressure, create thin lines, or with more pressure, create thicker lines. And you can even have a smooth transition between them, which isn't really something you can achieve with a pen and a big round brush tip. And these markers have replaceable tips, so it would be really cool if in the future Ohuhu made felt tips for these markers that you can just switch out. So for the people who prefer felt, they could just buy those and switch it out. But in terms of the formula of the paint itself, I didn't really run into problems aside from maybe the yellow not being opaque enough on top of other colors. Another thing is that the metallic colors kind of felt out of place here. Maybe it's just because I'm in the bubble of character art where I'm I wish there was more skin tones than metallic colors, or maybe shades that had more variation in values. And yeah, that just goes to say I'm not a huge fan of metallic because I never really use them in my art. I'm a character artist, so one of my biggest focus is making sure that I get skin tones correct and accurate. But I bet for people who do implement a lot of metallic in their art, I bet they'd be really happy about the inclusion of them in this set. But hey, you can't please everyone. There's no real way of knowing exactly what type of art that your audience is doing. So I know Ohuhu is very much capable of making varying skin tone shades because they've done it before in their alcohol marker collection. So I am really looking forward to seeing where they will go with these acrylic markers and the shades that future collections will have. So those are the pros and cons of these markers, at least the ones that I thought of while trying them out. And I wanted to talk about this piece a little and my thought process behind it, I guess. So I went on Pinterest and I found a couple poses and I mashed them together. Since I couldn't do much with the skin, I knew I wanted some sort of full body in here so that I can focus on the clothes. And so my plan was to give Sydney a red dress that's showing off her, body yada yada. And she's Filipino, so her color scheme tends to be the primary colors. And, primary colors are really in line with the Filipino national colors. So the shade of red that this collection had was it was chef's kiss for Sydney. So bam, red dress with some stars on it. And it looks so good in the finished piece. When I did the first page, there was a lot of yellow, almost too much. And so this time I wanted other colors to also shine through. which is why I made her dress red. And I gave her some red flowers to also hold, and then added some green as like an accent color. And I even gave her a bandana so that she wasn't like just wearing all yellow, because that's kind of how the first page turned out. But I did still want the background to be yellow, and I'm a stickler, and it kind of felt like a waste to use the acrylic yellow marker for the background, so I did it with alcohol marker instead. But I kind of wish that I just went for it, because it didn't turn out as vibrant as the paint. It's just that I know I'm gonna use this yellow one a lot, and I only have one of it, and so I'm being very like conservative with it. Like, oh, I won't use it for the background now, because like what if I want to draw a yellow dress later on, and I would hate to like run out of ink or something, you know, or not ink, paint. So I was just like trying to be conservative, and it's like it's the hoarder in me coming out. So all in all, it was really fun to just draw some art with these markers. And it was really, really nice to be able to paint over things and sort of like replicate that part of my process from digital art, because I couldn't really do that with alcohol markers. And now when I do anything with alcohol markers and I feel like doing a little bit of overpainting or adding some accessories that I forgot about, I can just, you know, whip these out and paint over. Anyway, guys, this is the full piece, and I am so happy with how it turned out. I mean, just to look at her, she is so cute in that dress. I wish I had it in real life. So once again, if you want to join the giveaway for a set of 48 alcohol markers from Ohuhu, follow mine and Ohuhu's Instagram, like the post on there, and tag some friends in the comments. It was really fun to work with these acrylic markers, and I am so excited to see where this line of Ohuhu products go. They are a brand that I feel like puts a lot of thought and effort into what they do. So I am really excited to see the future of these acrylic markers. So once again, thank you Ohuhu for sponsoring this video, and I can't wait to do more with these and, you know, see what I can come up with. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Goodbye!